Hare Krishna. So we have a problem is in that my iPad and my phone are not connecting to the internet. This phone is already connected. It's my old phone. And the problem with this old phone is that it has horrible audio. So can you understand what I'm saying? I'm just holding this mic right next to me, and this audio tends to go up and down, and if I don't speak loud enough, then it's difficult to hear. So I'm holding the mic right now. So you have to let me know how it sounds, and some strange reason I can't. I would like to get on. I would like to get on the internet on my other device, but it won't let me. So it's clear? Okay. I think I have to talk loud. Anyway, I'm going to hold this mic. I'm going to hold this mic right next to me. And, yeah, okay. So the topic for today's class is a question. And the question is on this phone. And if I try to read the question on the phone, I'm afraid we'll get disconnected. So, Sundari Radha, can you write the question down so I don't have to go into WhatsApp to read it, which might cause me to leave this broadcast. But if you can write the question down here, I can read it here. Although I know the basic idea of the question. So, as you're writing it down, I'll begin to speak, and then you can add details to the question. So, and in the meantime, I will try to see if I can get online on my other phone. My old phone is the only one phone that wants to get online for some reason. Let's see. Excuse me for a minute, I can't. Anyway, I guess we're doing okay. So, the question was about basically when unfortunate things happen to devotees. The question was, she's writing it now, about when unfortunate things happen to devotees and why they happen, or why Krishna doesn't protect us, or seemingly he doesn't protect us, or why would he allow these things to happen. The doubts, okay, here's the question. The doubts we sometimes experience around, is Krishna really merciful to me? Every day I'm hearing and seeing so much suffering in the devotees. If Krishna is so merciful to the devotees, why are so many suffering? So I'd like to better understand the mercy of Krishna, remove these doubts, misunderstandings, and judgment of Krishna, increasing faith. Okay. Well, there's many ways we can answer the question, and why don't we start with the most practical, which is some devotees have gotten in automobile accidents because they fell asleep driving. So then if we were to reword your question, we could say, why did Krishna allow them to fall asleep? Why didn't he wake them up? Etc., etc. And we could rephrase the question, why did the devotee allow himself to fall asleep? Why didn't he wake himself up? And to make it even more obvious, if I, let's say, accidentally, while I'm cooking, put my hand on a hot pot, then I could say, because I'm a devotee, why did Krishna allow me to burn my finger. Of course, you could remove it one step and say, why did Krishna allow me to put my hand in a hot pot? But since we've all put our hand in a hot pot, we understand that it's our negligence that we put our hand on the hot pot. So generally we wouldn't blame Krishna for that. But let's just for the sake of discussion say, well, why would he allow it to burn? And then the question would be, was he allowing it to burn? Or can we accept that those are the natural laws of nature, and if you put your hand on a hot pot, it burns? And we often do foolish things. We're often negligent, and sometimes we hurt ourselves. So then we could rephrase the question, if Krishna's merciful to his devotees, even if they jumped off a 10-story building, why would he allow them to break their ankle or knee or hip or even die? So the first thing we have to face, and I'll say this with a little caveat, it is true practically, but there are exceptions to this rule due to Krishna's mercy. But generally, most often, almost always, virtually every time, the laws of nature, they work on us as they work on non-devotees. So when you jump out of a building, you fall. When an atheist jumps out of a building, he falls. When you jump, you hurt yourself. When he jumps, he hurts himself. Now, there have been cases when devotees didn't hurt themselves and Krishna came and protected them. And why he would protect one devotee and why not another? Well, when you see him, you can ask him. But for the sake of discussion, as Prabhupada said, becoming Krishna conscious is not a challenge to the laws of nature. So the question was asked to Prabhupada, and it's an interesting question, and Prabhupada's answer relates to what we're talking about, and it's an interesting answer. And Prabhupada's answer is, the question was, Prahlad Maharaj, his father put poison in his food, and he offered it and ate it, and he took it as prasadam. Even though it had poison, it didn't affect him. And we also know that he should have been killed in other ways. And so that seems to defy the laws of nature, and therefore your question seems entirely valid, that if Krishna protected Prahlad, why isn't he protecting all of us? In any case, we're all not Prahlad, but Prabhupada said Krishna consciousness is not a challenge to the laws of nature. So it's not like, okay, well, I decided I would test my faith today, so after cooking I got some cyanide and I put it in, and I'm ordering all my disciples. Today is a test of faith. The other day was Guru Purnima, so now we want to test faith in Guru. So I'm ordering you, at your next meal, put cyanide, and have faith that if you offer this meal to Krishna, and you have faith that you're his devotee. So we have faith. We have faith, right? Okay, so should that faith include jumping off a building from the top floor with faith Krishna will protect us? Should it include taking cyanide with faith? Should we follow that example of Prahlad Maharaj? He did that, and he was thrown off a mountain cliff, and Krishna caught him. So therefore, well, one thing we could say is become like Prahlad. Then first become like Prahlad, then test the theory of cyanide. Before that, you may not be alive to view the results. But anyway, Prabhupada's point was, don't challenge the laws of nature. A devotee doesn't challenge the laws of nature. So that was his response to Prahlad eating poison. Prahlad could do that, but it's not our business to challenge the laws of nature and go, Krishna, you should protect me. So I think that's important. Now, as I'm saying, it's not that Krishna won't protect you, and it's not that we shouldn't have faith that Krishna will protect us, because we see he does. And a lot of times we get ourselves into trouble, and he does save us. He does that for me all the time. in areas where maybe we're not so good at something. And Krishna says, I make up the difference in Bhagavad Gita. And then yes, chintayantamam ye jana paryupasate tesham nitya biyuktanam yogakshema vahamyaham. So he makes up the difference. So he does, but Prabhupada's point is, don't be haphazard in your life thinking, I don't have to be intelligent and practical because Krishna will make up the difference. No, he can make up the difference if and when he wants, but generally, if we do something that violates the laws of nature, like go out in the ocean on a stormy day and you don't know how to swim, there's a possibility you might drown. You could say, well, if I'm supposed to drown, I will, because Krishna will save me if he wants, and if he wants me to die, I will. And but that verges on that doesn't verge on the border. That is well in the ocean of fanaticism and misunderstanding of the philosophy. Now, you could say Prahlad felt that way, but that was Prahlad's realization. He could see Krishna, and he could see Krishna protecting him. And his faith, this brings up the topic of faith, because then you could ask, well, is it a question of faith? If I have faith, can I eat poison? Can I sprinkle my prasadam with poison? Not that you would, but if someone put poison, and I had faith that this is Krishna prasadam, could I eat it and not get sick? It's an excellent question. If I say yes, some devotees might try that, and then I would be the cause of their death. So the answer Prabhupada gave was no, don't do that. The other side of the answer is when you're on that level of pure faith, that faith can, as the Bible says, move mountains. So that faith could change the material effects something has. So I don't want to deny that, but I think it's important that that our actions should be equivalent with realized faith, not theoretical faith. So if it's theoretical faith, then it means we're totally under the laws of nature and we have to respect them. And that was Prabhupada's point. Don't challenge them, but follow them. So I think it's an important point, at least as a starting point, that if you see there's been suffering in your life, not if you see, there has been in all of our lives. The first thing that I think we should do is backtrack. Why? Why is the suffering there? What did I have to do with it? Before we ask the question, why did Krishna allow it? Maybe we should look at it more practically. I did A and got B as a result. Whenever you do A, B is the result. So that answers the question, why did Krishna allow it? Because Krishna is not interfering with the laws of nature. So then, instead of asking that question, or one answer to that question would be, well, I created the problem. And because I created the problem, I have to suffer the result. Now, could Krishna interfere with the problem? Yes, but generally, he's not interfering with the laws of nature because he set up those laws, and that's how the world works. If you lie, steal, cheat, and so generally you won't have many friends, and you'll probably end up in trouble with the law. Why didn't I killed somebody, but I'm a devotee, so why didn't Krishna interfere? Maybe Krishna wants you to go to jail to pay for the karma, to purify you, because that's right. So you don't want to use it in this sense that I can do anything and Krishna will protect me. And then it brings us to the next point. Well, what does it mean that Krishna will protect me? If he protects me materially, is that Krishna's protection? Maybe that's not how Krishna sees it. Maybe Krishna is not protecting materially, but by doing that, we're learning something and he's protecting us spiritually. Now, if Krishna wants to protect us, definitely he can. And if he doesn't, then we have to think, why isn't Krishna protecting me? Is it that I deserve this? Is this my karma? Did I create this reaction due to my previous actions, and I'm just getting a reaction for what I did, and Krishna's not interfering because it's necessary for me to get this reaction to learn? My general realization is that when there is difficulty, it's always purifying, but it's not always pleasing. Sometimes it causes a lot of anxiety and stress. We sometimes think if I wasn't in this level, I didn't have this level of anxiety or stress, I would be more Krishna conscious. Sometimes I can't chant properly because there's so much stress. So we would think, why wouldn't Krishna remove the stress? Because that would be better for my spiritual life. But on further inspection and reflection, we generally see that stress or anxiety is good in the sense that I'm more in touch with the reality of this world, because the world is stressful. And perhaps the way I'm living is creating stress, and perhaps the stress is meant to push me a little to either change my life or to accept that I'm not the enjoyer and the nature of the world is stressful, and that stress is actually keeping me detached, because it does. Stress, anxiety, difficulty does detach us, because when it hits a certain threshold, many of us, I don't want to say we become suicidal, but if at that point a doctor told us you have 5 days to live, I think in situations of extreme stress and difficulty, we would probably be happy to hear that. Oh, that's good. I only have 5 more days to put up with this. That'll be a relief if I could die. I've personally experienced that in high stress situations. I didn't have a doctor tell me that, but I used to think if a doctor did, I would find relief in that statement. As maybe perverted as that sounds, but it's true. And I don't know if you've been in a situation like that, but yeah, sometimes things are so difficult that a devotee may feel, if I could die and get another body, get out of the situation, or die and go back to Krishna right now, this very moment, I don't think I would regret it. I don't think I would be attached. So, in that sense, I think we can all admit that we need to be pushed. And so if we understand in that way, we would probably see, at least on some level, that whatever difficulty there is, it is detaching us. That's for sure, because when there's difficulty, it's hard to be attached. In fact, the psychology of detachment is a byproduct, at least on the material level. If it's not the result of Krishna consciousness on the material level or the psychological level, detachment is a byproduct of pain, of difficulty. You've detached from something that has caused you pain or difficulty. And that's why Shastra, it often talks about the pain and difficulty of the material world with the hopes of detaching us. But if you experience it, it's more powerful. And so if you experience anything that's really nice and enjoyable, then the tendencies become attached to it. Right? Is that the idea? Yes? I'm going to move this over. I'm going to talk to you directly. Is that better? Am I actually looking at you? Or am I looking at something else? It looks like I'm looking at something else, but you can tell me. There's nobody here, so I can look directly at the camera. So, I've often said churches would be bankrupt and empty if everything were perfect. So we've made 3 points so far. That we shouldn't challenge the laws of nature. That the suffering may be a direct result of my own action, and if I say, why did Krishna allow it, then I'm not taking responsibility. And the last point, that we need it. Now, there's another point, I wrote an article about this, and the article is called, It's All Krishna's Mercy, Prabhu. I think something like that, because, especially younger devotees, we sometimes say whatever happens, it's Krishna's mercy. And Sometimes we say it and we don't even know how it's His mercy. We just accept that everything's His mercy. So when we say it's Krishna's mercy, generally we mean it's His mercy. I just don't know right now how it is, but I know everything is Krishna's mercy, so this must be His mercy also. So, Prabhupada was once asked, interesting question. Yeah, that's still it. It's all Krishna's mercy, Prabhupada. Right? Yeah. There was a question that was asked to Prabhupada, and someone said, "Isn't God love?" I don't know if you've heard how Prabhupada answers these questions. And Prabhupada said, "Why?" Something like, "Why only love?" In other words, it's a common concept that God is love, and Prabhupada's saying, "Why only love? God is everything." So He's also hate. He's everything. There's no duality. He's all good, so you could say, is God all good? Yes. And so even the hate is good. So, because God can't actually be bad and He can't really hate as we hate. So, if you say God is love, He's also hate, but within the hate, there's also love. Because it's transcendental, it's not conducted by the modes of nature. So in that article, It's All Krishna's Mercy, the premise was there's no difference between suffering and love because it's all the same, because it all brings you to Krishna, and that's all Krishna's plan. And it teaches us, I think one of the things it teaches us is that we made a huge mistake in coming to the material world, and we continued to make a huge mistake by thinking we could be happy and thinking we could enjoy and control. And when we try to enjoy and control, we suffer. And it's really good specifically to suffer trying to enjoy and control something that you're attached to, because that's how you become detached from it. And that's a message or a lesson from Krishna. Like in a specific area that you're attached to, and every time you try to enjoy it, you suffer. That is definitely a sign of Krishna's mercy, because he's trying to tell you, you need to give up this attachment, because every time you try, you suffer. And if you give up that attachment, you stop trying, you'll stop suffering. And so the suffering is my lesson to you, and that's a good lesson. Just like sometimes we talk about people who don't have sensations. So if they're accidentally burning themselves, but their eyes don't see it, they don't feel it. And they could be severely burnt. But obviously a person who has sensation will feel it and remove himself from the fire. So it's dangerous not to have sensation. So we could say similarly, it's somewhat dangerous to, it would be somewhat dangerous if everything was just perfect. If even the suffering, we didn't feel it as suffering. You know, like some spiritual teachings will teach you how to transcend suffering. And that's also there to some degree in Bhagavad Gita. But, you know, Krishna's saying be equal opposed, be beyond duality. But at the same time, Krishna is saying be aware of the birth, old age, disease, and death. Janma mritu jara vyadi dukkha doshana darshanam. Take darshan of the dukkha's, of the miseries, of birth, old age, disease, and death. In other words, see it, be aware of it. So be transcendental, don't be affected by it, but be aware of it. So some so-called spiritual teachings teach you how to be happy in this world. You know, you should be happy, optimistic, positive. You know, those are great teachings. But when misunderstood or extended too far, it can firmly situate you in a sattvic position in which you become attached to this world. Life, you've probably read things on the internet. Life is great, just appreciate every breath, every opportunity. And so that within a certain context is a great teaching, but within a broader context, without the philosophy of Krishna consciousness behind it, it's not actually in and of itself a good teaching when you put it within the context of a broader teaching of birth, old age, disease, and death. Appreciate the moment. You appreciate the moment, appreciate the value that you have because you can serve Krishna, you can utilize your life to become a pure devotee. So appreciate that value. Hold on a second. I'm going to close this door because my daughter's talking. Can you close the door, Braja? Okay, so you understand that principle that we should be optimistic, we should be grateful, enthusiastic, and so forth, and happy in Krishna consciousness. But if something comes, and we're meant to take note of it, that Mahatma, you're trying to enjoy this. Every time you try and enjoy it, you suffer. If I try to turn my back to it and spin it around and say, no, I'm not suffering, have to be optimistic and so on, that may not be a good idea because I actually am suffering, and I'm suffering as a result of what I've done, and I should be aware of that. Otherwise, I'm going to do it again. So some so-called spiritual philosophies take you to a level of optimism and so-called equanimity that you're not feeling the reality of the pinching of this world, which is helpful in uplifting you to the spiritual platform, because the whole idea of coming to the spiritual platform is to become free from the desire to put yourself in the center, put ourselves in the center, free from the desire to enjoy separately from Krishna. And in the name of spirituality, many people teach how to be happy in a selfish way. So, for example, I was thinking of a talk or even a book, and the title would be something like this: Becoming happy won't make you happy. You understand that concept of the way I approach happiness can be, without Krishna, without spirituality, can be self-centered. And in the name of spirituality, we achieve this happiness, and we think that happiness is perfection. And we might be oblivious to the realities of this world that we need to be able to see. As Krishna says, darshanam, take darshan of the reality. See the reality of birth, old age, disease, and death, because that's going to help you. And when things are good, we forget the reality of birth, old age, disease, and death. And so when something's bad, it's like a reminder like you have an appointment and your phone rings. So it's like a reminder, oh yeah, it's really not as good as I was believe it was, or that I forgot. I was pretending or forgetting that it's not good. But it's not like that. Hold on a second. I want to close my daughter's door because if I hear her talk, it's hard for me to concentrate. Give me like 20 seconds. I'll be right back. We're in Ireland now, and her friends are in India, and it's easy to talk to them. Where she just came from America, it's hard to talk to them because of the time difference. So she's talking to her friends in India, and very excited, and so excited I could hear it. Okay. Now, there's another interesting thing about this question, which kind of may even appear to be antithetical to what I just said, because Sundari Radha was saying, why sometimes devotees, what was the word? so many so you use the word suffering. And suffering is also relative, because if you've ever been around very advanced devotees and there's a situation in which, quote unquote, they're suffering, but they're actually not suffering, and you're looking at them and thinking, he's supposed to be suffering, anyone in this situation would be suffering, and he's not suffering, and he's thinking, this is Krishna's mercy, this is what I needed to be smashed, I'm so proud, I'm so attached, I'm so this or that, and this is like, this is so sweet, and maybe they're very ill, and finally I have time to read Prabhupada's books. Unless I got this ill, I would be running around, and I feel so blissful after so many years in Krishna consciousness. I neglected really studying Prabhupada's books, and now I'm so sick. I can't do anything, but I don't know if you've ever seen devotees in this situation, but there are. And when we see this, when we look at that situation, we're almost incredulous, because we're thinking nobody in this situation would be happy, and this devotee's happy. So then the suffering has to be put in parenthesis, and not parenthesis, quotations, so-called suffering, because they're not suffering, they don't see it as suffering. So I think the word suffering can be very relative to the individual. And for some devotees, they also see, there's another aspect of suffering, they also see suffering as the greatest pleasure. In other words, if I'm suffering as a result of my effort to be Krishna conscious, or in some way it's connected to Krishna, I gave up my occupation, now financially I'm troubled, and I wanted to do more service, and I'm undergoing this difficulty because of my desire to serve, or I've decided to take on a difficult service. It's putting me in anxiety. I could have lived free of anxiety if I didn't take the service. Something like that. The devotee can feel very blissful taking on that anxiety, because it's for Krishna. And so that anxiety can actually be the source of ecstasy. I've experienced that, and it's an interesting feeling, because we have, I think it was a movie, The Agony and the Ecstasy. If it wasn't a movie, we can make it. That's called brahmachari life in the beginning of Krishna consciousness. It's like there's a lot of agony and a lot of ecstasy. And sometimes the agony and the ecstasy are in one, or not sometimes, usually they're in one package. So it's like they happen simultaneously. So a lot of times the suffering is the devotee's greatest pleasure, because that suffering is in Krishna's service, and the devotee knows, if I don't suffer for Krishna, I'm going to suffer on my own account. I'll be in anxiety for my sense gratification. Now at least I'm in anxiety for Krishna's sense gratification. So that anxiety is blissful. So in that sense, we can say suffering is relative. It's not, what's suffering for me may not be suffering for you. It may be great pleasure to suffer in Krishna's service. Now, there is also an answer which is the mysterious answer, which I'm giving this answer now, not in the beginning, which is the mysterious answer of, you don't know why you're suffering. You don't know why is Krishna allowing me to suffer? But then most devotees, when something unjust happens, and they're after the frustration and things have settled down, many devotees will start thinking, I probably deserved it from a past life, or they'll start thinking, what did I do to cause this? In the heat of the moment, generally, there can almost be a tendency, and sometimes a tendency, to blame Krishna. Krishna, how could you allow this? I just tried to surrender. I just tried to serve you, and you allowed this to happen. When you remove yourself from the situation for some time, you tend to become more clear how it was good that it happened, because it caused me to change the way I think, or change what I do, or caused me to reflect on what I'm doing. It caused me to become aware of my responsibility in the matter. It caused me to become more self-aware of what I'm doing and how I'm treating people or analyzing situations, or it was actually really good and the only way I would have ever gotten out of the situation is through the suffering. So sometimes in retrospect, we have a whole new analysis of the situation and we see that it was really good. Now, of course, I think inherent in your question is probably the concept of, I don't see it's good. But then we have to ask you the question, well, what was good about it? Probably if you think about it, you'll realize what was good about it is that it changed me, because if I'm suffering, then I would say generally, if we're suffering, it's something we're doing that's causing it. And the suffering, when we can say the suffering is good, it's because it finally made me realize what I was doing. Cause it, and now I can stop doing that, and I can do something to produce a different result. Or it caused me to be detached, or it woke me up. So I think for a devotee, that's a better way of looking at suffering. And from that article that I wrote, It's All Krishna's Mercy, the premise of that article is you look at whatever's happening as Krishna's mercy, even if it doesn't seem like it, you look at it that way and you try to understand how it is, Krishna's mercy. And my personal experience is if you do that, you will usually find reasons that it is Krishna's mercy that you didn't see before because you couldn't understand how Krishna could allow this to happen. Now, let's take it to a less personal level. Let's just take it to the level of the world. And I think we understand this. We don't like to see suffering in the world, but when people are suffering, we understand the karmic connection of war and animal slaughter. We understand quite clearly. We see there's a lot of child abuse going on in the world, a lot of animal slaughter going on in the world, a lot of war, a lot of bad things. But if you just stand back and look at it and say, if there's so much child abuse going on in the world, if there's so much animal slaughter, if there's so much war, if there's so much violence and crime, rape and so on, and karma will always come back to the perpetrator, then doesn't it make sense? And I don't say this in an uncompassionate way, and we should be compassionate towards the animals, towards people who are innocently being victimized. But it begs the question, how innocent are people? Because if millions and millions and millions of people are eating meat and therefore partaking in the violence, then doesn't it follow that millions of animals would have to be killed? Those people would have to take that karma. Or for every woman that is raped, some man will again take birth as a woman and be raped. Or something, some reaction will come to that person for which we could say, oh, that was horrible. The world is cruel. There's so much suffering. Why does Krishna allow this? And the answer is, he doesn't allow it. It's just the laws of nature are acting. Why did Krishna allow me to get hurt when I fell down the stairs? Because that's the law of gravity. And the stairs are stairs. It's not an even floor. Why did Krishna allow me to get hurt when I fell on the floor? Because that's what happens when you fall on the floor. Sometimes you break bones. That's just physical law. So I think, we have to see that karmic consequence when we look at the world and say, how can Krishna allow this? And the answer, of course, is he doesn't want it. He's allowing and wanting are two different things, but he's letting us run rampant with sinful activity. So yes, he's allowing it in that sense. He's not wanting it. And, we look at that and think, oh, what kind of God would allow that? But if you understand the ultimate scheme of things, it all ultimately works to bring us back to Godhead. Because Prabhupada said, the material world is created by Krishna for one purpose, to get us back to him. So, if we take everything we've said and we want to put it under the umbrella of one thought, that's the thought, that everything in this world is meant to get us closer to Krishna. So anything bad that happens to you or me or anyone, we should think, this is helping me or this person get back to Krishna. Or of course, in the case of death, it's more obvious that maybe this person has gone back to Krishna or has gone back to a better position because they've done so much devotional service in this life, so they're going not back onto a better position in the next life. And so that's kind of the what's the word? I want to say panacea, but it's kind of what glosses over all the suffering when we understand everything in this world, directly or indirectly, is meant to help people become Krishna conscious or help people get out of the material world. And of course, you might say, if they're not devotees, how is that helping? Because they don't know that's the purpose. But Prabhupada says that is the function, and therefore Krishna created this system where when we break nature's law, we suffer. So it is having effect, although it could take hundreds or thousands of lifetimes before it registers, before this degree of suffering kind of hits a threshold, a boiling point, so to speak. And then in that life, the person is ready for Krishna consciousness. So it's like water on the stone. It is having an effect. I just got a message that the weather in London is warmer. We're leaving Ireland, where it's nice and cold and cloudy today. Yes. I'm looking at your messages right now. Krishna says, maybe Krishna wants to show us that we feel more connected to him when in pain or suffering, like Queen Kunti was praying. That generally we find, it's interesting because no one wants to suffer, and we often know that when we suffer, we're more Krishna conscious. And we generally agree that any suffering we've been through that's helped us become more Krishna conscious, when we look back on it, we appreciate it. We just wouldn't want it to happen again, but when we look back on it, we appreciate it. And then in our saner moments, we would say, yeah, let it happen again, because it would be good for us. Now, there's another nice question from Krishna Karshini, otherwise known as Malgorjata. Is that how it's pronounced? Malgorjata. And she's saying, Prabhupada said, be happy in Krishna consciousness. So what does it mean? Especially in light of everything I've said, be happy when you're suffering. See, we could say, although you may not agree, but for the sake of discussion, not that you wouldn't agree, but you may not understand. We could say a devotee never suffers. And you say, oh, Prabhu, I had a really bad stomach ache last week. How is it that a devotee doesn't suffer? Because even though he had a stomach ache and you were suffering the stomach ache, your consciousness was happy. You were still happy to be a devotee. You were still happy to read and chant and discuss Krishna consciousness and do your service. So, although Prabhupada spoke about the world's place of suffering, he never said, therefore, all of us should be very unhappy. He would always conclude devotees happy, which is a paradox, right? How could you be happy in a place of suffering? So the idea is that a devotee, because he's hearing and chanting about Krishna, he's happy. And Prabhupada, I was just with Korma yesterday, and we're talking about going to jail, and they got arrested many times in Australia. Harinam parties were getting arrested, and Prabhupada says, okay, just, go to jail, you can preach in jail. So what did Prabhupada mean by that? Jail is a place of suffering, but you're devotees, so you just go to jail and do kirtan and preach, you'll be fine. So, jail is suffering, but is it really suffering for a devotee? Does a devotee ever really suffer? I've been in a lot of anxiety managing different things and dealing with different anxieties that devotees have and trying to help them. But at the end of the day, when I go to sleep, I don't think, I'm suffering so much. Not like it was before I was a devotee. I remember before I was a devotee, the great suffering was that your friend got something you wanted, you didn't get it, or your girlfriend ran off with somebody, and your band didn't win the contest. We would get so upset about these things. But when you become a devotee, you might say, oh, well, that still happens. It may happen, but it's more rare, and to the degree that it happens is less. And if it does happen, you recuperate faster. And at one time, Prabhupada said, if you're not happy, you're in Maya. How do I know if I'm in Maya? All right. Look at yourself in the mirror. Do you look happy? If you look happy, you're not in Maya. If you look unhappy, you are in Maya. That's the test. The litmus test, the acid test. So that's what Prabhupada said. If you're not happy, you're in Maya, because Krishna consciousness is happy. And you see that, that's the point I was making, that even things are difficult, even there's anxiety, your level of happiness in Krishna consciousness doesn't oscillate very much. It's just a struggle. But, in the midst of all that, you sit down and take nice prasadam, you have nice kirtan next morning. So there's so many transcendental activities that keep your consciousness above all the anxiety. So that's how it works. So Christina says, 2 days ago I listened to a lecture of Rana Swami, and he said that everyone suffers in this world, but devotees know why it happens and they can accept the suffering like the mercy of Krishna. Yeah, exactly. And this is our happiness, yeah. And also, let's say you're suffering and you know exactly why, like you did something or you thought something, and Krishna has brought on that suffering because he's trying to purify you of that. And you, even though the suffering's there, you will feel very much loved by Krishna. You think, oh, this is amazing that Krishna consciousness is so personal that I did something to cause suffering, yet at the same time, I know Krishna was there behind it, and I feel his love. So, sometimes my father would punish me when I did something wrong. So there's that sense of, he wouldn't have taken the trouble to punish me if he didn't love me. And Prabhupada said, if the spiritual master gets mad at you, you should think, well, at least he's taking time to try to correct me. And so that's a manifestation of his love. And if you take it any other way, then you haven't understood it. So, Krishna consciousness is so personal that if you realize that some suffering is a result of what you've done, and Krishna has very carefully delivered it to you because you needed it for a lesson, then you can feel quite fortunate, right? And Krishna is so mercifully, so personal. So we don't want suffering, we don't want difficulty, but I think we need to ask why it's there. That's always the question. Why? Because the assumption of this question was that, why does Krishna allow his devotees to suffer? And one of the first things I said, well, maybe he doesn't want the suffering in some situations. Maybe it's entirely you brought it on yourself. And so you need to become aware of that. It's not that Krishna wants you to suffer, but you put your hand in fire and fire burns, and he's honoring the laws of nature. And if every time you put your hand in fire it doesn't burn, then you might become pretty haphazard in your life, thinking, oh, I'm totally protected by Krishna. I can walk on the freeway with my eyes closed. Right? Tony says, is it also purification if I feel that I'm suffering because blank? I didn't do my rounds or wasn't able to do some service? Yeah. It may be true, it may not be true. You may be suffering for other reasons, but in terms of your internal state of consciousness, there will be some suffering if you don't do your rounds, or you couldn't do your service, or you couldn't do it well. But that's natural, but that's good, because it'll rectify you. So it's not that we're anti-suffering, but I think Prabhupada's point is the general context of a devotee is that he's happy. Prabhupada Saraswati said, for a devotee, he sees everything in the world as happiness because it's all connected to Krishna. And so I'm so fortunate to be a devotee and connected to Krishna. And within the context of that, I do feel suffering because I didn't finish my rounds, or I didn't chant them well, or I didn't do my service. But that suffering is transcendental. And so that suffering, it doesn't really undermine your happiness in Krishna consciousness, and in some sense it fosters it. Because it's not material. It's material happiness, it's all about sense gratification. Material unhappiness is about not having sense gratification. So your unhappiness, so-called, is about not being Krishna conscious. So, that's different. That's unhappiness within happiness. That's transcendental. So, when we talk about suffering, which is pure, unadulterated suffering in the material world, that happens when you're influenced by Maya, you're in the modes of nature, you're hankering, you're lamenting. Devotee is naksochati nakangshati. He's not lamenting, nakangshati, he's not hankering. The hankering and lamenting causes suffering. So I may be suffering because I didn't chant my rounds, but it's not that I'm today hankering, lamenting, I need this, you have it, I want it, I don't like you because you have it. It's not like that. You're still able to, the philosophy of Krishna consciousness still exists within you. Right? So your life is still centered around Krishna, so everything's still good. Sometimes, so Krishna Karshani says, sometimes devotees who are suffering tend to see that non-devotees are happier than devotees. Well, I think maybe a better way, and I understand what you're saying. I had this problem when I was becoming a devotee because I lived in Berkeley. It was a college town, but this college town was special because there were so many hippies that weren't going to school living in the college town. And, the mood of the hippies was really to explore, to enjoy. The hippies were like a new generation of explorers into consciousness, into nature. Let's explore how the Indians live, exploring new kinds of music, So they looked really happy, and I was going to the temple, and they were saying, "You're not happy." I'm like, okay, I'm not happy. But then I go out on the street and I'd see all the hippies and everybody was like, yeah. Of course, they were often happy because they were smoking the happy weed. But it was really hard for me because I was looking at their faces and they really looked happy, and I didn't understand for a couple of months what do they mean. And then when I understand, I said, even if they're happy, number one, they're subjected to the duality of material life. So they're going to go up and down. And, part of the reason they're happy is because 10 minutes ago they just had a lot of sense gratification, or there's a lot of sense gratification in store for them today, so they're looking forward to it. And so they're pretty excited about it. Right? And they're also happy because they're in denial that they're going to get old and they're going to die. So their happiness, number one, it's temporary, and it's based on a denial. And so when we say the non-devotees are happier than we are, we could rephrase that in saying the non-devotees are getting more sense gratification than we're getting, and we're not yet getting enough Krishna conscious, transcendental sense gratification. So on the sense gratification scale, they're getting more therefore they appear to be happier. But on another level, deep down within, they're not happy. They're frustrated all the time. They really are. And if you don't believe me, go spend some time with your relatives or old friends, and you'll see they're not happy. They're happy when they go out and have a good time, but they really aren't. It just looks like it. But those people are having a great time, that are happy. Once you talk to them and see what their life's like, they're on their third wife, they're overcoming an addiction, they've been fired 6 times, that's what's behind that happiness. So don't be so illusioned by it. So Shankarabhat says, chant and dance the holy names with devotion and be happy. Prabhupada's highest thinking phrase. You can chant and dance, but in order to be happy, we must do it with love and devotion. Yeah. So the point is, like Shankarabhat's saying, if you do the process and you do it right, then you'll be happy. So with Krishna Krsna, he's saying sometimes it seems the non-devotees are happier. If we don't do the process well, then they could be in that moment happier, and we've denied ourselves of sense gratification, and we're not getting the bliss of Krishna consciousness. So on the scale meter, when we put it up to our heart of happiness, it seems like they have more of it and we have more frustration. That may be true. At the same time, where are they going to end up at the end of life? And if you continue, even if you're not unhappy, if you're not happy, but if you continue, where are you going to end up? You're going to end up at Krishna's lotus feet. Right? Yeah, Prabhupada made me from hippie to happy. So devotees, whatever we're struggling with, the result will be good. And last thing I want to say, because I have to pack, I'm leaving in an hour, is that we were talking about Bhaktivinoda Thakur on his disappearance day. We gave a class online, and one of the things we were talking about was how he struggled a lot in his life, especially in his earlier years as a young married man. He had financial trouble, and he was moving around a lot before he finally got settled and got a good job in the government. So we might wonder, well, he's a devotee, or he was playing the part of a non-devotee, about to be a devotee. Why would he suffer? And I think that's a good example of that. That's the nature of this world, that sometimes even someone who's come down to the material world plays that part of a conditioned soul who suffers, and that's what it means to be a conditioned soul. Everybody has to suffer on some level. So some people, they won't have difficulty making money, but their children will turn out bad. Some people won't have difficulty making money, but they'll have health issues. Some people won't have difficulty making money, but they'll have issues with the law. Some people won't have difficulty making money, but they'll have other issues. So it's just the nature of this world. And when the acharyas go through those difficulties, then they're setting an example for us. I don't want to say setting an example, but they're showing that even if you're a devotee, you may have to go through some of these problems. Pandavas had to go through it. So, there's this idea, if I just become a devotee, I won't have any problems. And that's not exactly true. You'll be better able to deal with your problems. But Prabhupada sometimes said that if you become a devotee and you think you won't have any problems, or we advertise that, it could cause people to misunderstand bhakti and become lazy. Well, I'll just become a devotee and then everything's fine. But devotional service is about serving Krishna despite the difficulty. So Krishna's always talking about that in the Gita. Do it. Hot and cold, happiness, distress, be tolerant. So what is Krishna saying? He said that's what's going to happen. That's the nature of this world. But that's how you become strong. Right? So you can say Krishna created duality to make us strong. Because he talks a lot about it in the Gita. Become free from duality. So the duality is an impetus to become free from it, because we need to. Okay, so I'm going to say goodbye. And then as far as broadcasts, today's Monday, so tomorrow night, 6:30 London time, which then should be 1:30 East Coast time. And I don't know what time in India, maybe too late for you. in India, we're going to do a class on cooperation at Soho Street, and I don't know if they have internet, and I don't know if we can get internet, but we will try. So 6:30 ISKCON time could mean a little later than 6:30. It could mean 6:30. England, generally devotees are on time. But then we have to see if we can get the internet going. And I'm assuming they have internet, and I'm assuming if they don't, someone will have data. And maybe my data card I can get to work. It's supposed to work there, but it wasn't working here in Ireland. I get it to work, and then so we can try to broadcast it. It's a very interesting topic, cooperation. So it'll be good. Anyway, if I can't broadcast it, then at least I'll record it. Krishna doesn't think they have internet, but they have to do. They have offices in their temple. Anyway, you never know. Maybe we'll have data. If I'm smart enough to figure out how to get my data card to work in another country. Okay. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. We'll see you when we see you. We'll keep you posted.